All right. So Microsoft Teams is the hub for teamwork in Office 365, and the advantage to using Teams is the ability of managing complex projects across locations, across time zones, as effectively as if you were working with someone in the same location. And it shares all the benefits of Office 365 that you can collaborate anywhere on any device with people in a variety of time zones. So these are sort of the key tenets of Teams, that we have a hub of Office 365 centered around chat, but customizable with a variety of Microsoft and third-party services, and that each chat room, each channel can be customized to meet the needs of a particular project. So let's talk about what makes an instance of Teams successful. And just as context, I managed the beta and preview programs for Teams. So I've worked with probably over 400 companies and have seen what has worked for them, as well as seen how Microsoft uses it. Microsoft is still the largest single user of Teams, and with no corporate mandate, we have over 120,000 users on a monthly basis. And it's also interesting to know that Teams is the fastest growing version 1 enterprise product in Microsoft's history. So it's seen really rapid adoption inside Microsoft and outside, more importantly, outside Microsoft. So in terms of best practices, the use of an interactive session to bring the whole team, or as many members of the team as you can get, up to speed on this new product has proven really essential, because today there's a lot of good collaboration tools available. There's Outlook, there's Yammer, there's competitive tools as well. And if you want to get the team really collaborating in Microsoft Teams, you're going to want at least half the team to be part of a session where you get an overview of the features. And I have recordings of these sessions, and I'd be happy to conduct a custom set of sessions for JLL as well. And then coming out of that, I encourage companies to invite users to volunteer to be the expert in Teams for their regional organizations, their departments. So it's easy to get people who are passionate about this product, because I think many people find the time savings so significant that they really get excited about introducing people to the power of Teams. So tap into that passion and build a team of informal champions. And a big part of the benefits of Teams is to combine the chat conversations and rich views on data. And that could be from Power BI, it could be from Excel, it could be using third-party services or websites. As long as they use secure HTTP, they can be pulled in, and customizing those is important. And we'll go through each one of these, but a key point I'm going to touch on several times is the importance of using at mentions. I'm just going to mute who's ever talking there. There we go. The importance of using at mentions. Many people don't recognize that that's a key aspect of how Teams works. So let's go through each one of these. In terms of the onboarding sessions, they typically take an hour, and the key point is that you don't come in and just demo the product. You invite someone from the team, perhaps someone who has no experience with Microsoft Teams, to share their screen, and then you walk through the key features of Teams with everyone from the project team interacting with the person who's demoing. So this has proven very successful here at Microsoft and outside. I would guess it's at least 5 times more effective than simply doing a straight demo. And the goal is when everyone walks out of that session, they feel confident in how to use the product, and recognize its power. The champions are important because you'll get new people joining the team, and you'll also need people who want to bring in additional projects, maybe people who are outside the company, customers or partners or vendors. And it's really helpful to have a group of people who spend a little bit more time going through the features of Teams and the various materials that Microsoft provides, and introducing it to people. And we've seen this inside Microsoft and in most of the major companies where the fastest adoption of Teams has happened. Champions have been a key part of that success. Now here's a list of checkpoint items that are worth reviewing as you're setting up a new team. The key complaint we hear from users is that, well, there's really two complaints we hear. One is that you can have too many teams and you can quickly create teams. And the other is that it's too hard to stay on top of all the information in the channels. So this checklist is really to cover the first issue in terms of things to think about when an organization wants to create a new team in Microsoft Teams. And my general rule of thumb is less is more. So when it comes to teams, you want fewer rather than more teams. When it comes to channels, after you get past the initial general channel, you want to have relatively few channels, because it's better to have the activity in a few set of channels. So think about broad topics for channels. And when it comes to the threads in conversations, I try to add on to existing threads wherever possible. So again, that's fewer rather than more. But then when it comes to tabs, I like to have more tabs rather than fewer, because we've got so many powerful tools available on the web within Office 365. We should bring the power of those to bear. And specifically, I think for each project tab, or excuse me, each project channel should have really three things. It should have a place where decisions are memorialized. That's often the wiki. It should have a tab for data, and that could be Power BI or Excel. And it should have a task list. And there we have Planner, as well as a whole set of third-party tools. You could use Microsoft Office Online, bringing that in as a website, but or Visual Studio for that matter. But you also could look at Asana or GitHub or Jira or Reiki. There's a whole set of third-party products that have written custom integrations as tabs for Microsoft Teams. And just to give you a sense for how we do things at Microsoft, I'm just going to do a quick switch over and clicking on our teams. You can see our team structure. We have quite a few different teams. One I like to show is our external partners channel. And it goes through that guidelines I talked about. We have OneNote as a place to memorialize decisions that we've made. We have a dashboard, actually several dashboards, and you can see the conversation in the chat right alongside the data, and that's a very powerful way of combining data and commentary. And then we have a Kanban board, a simple Kanban board written in a Planner for tracking design requests. And a lot of people don't use these features on the side, but toggling on and off the chat window is helpful, and then expanding the view using these two arrows in the upper right, so we can see various design requests, the items that are on hold, and the items that are completed. And all this is done with the services that are included in Office 365. So a very powerful and convenient way to organize information. In fact, in our team meetings, we will typically open the channel related to the particular topic at hand, and we'll go through the tabs. And that's an effective way of talking about items and also capturing the notes of the meeting for anyone who might not have been there. Now, when you think about Teams naming, I think being specific as opposed to using common terms like test team are important, and then qualifying whether it's a project team or a work group. And the name of a team can show up in the, for example, in people's Outlook Outlook groups view. So remember that you don't want to have something really confidential like the name of a company you're about to acquire that would be insider trading information. Come up with a code name for the project as opposed to including that as a name. And also consider that there's a cascade effect across Office 365. So it's helpful to use names for the channels as they would be viewed both in SharePoint and in Planner, in addition to how they show up in Teams, and that you can impose a sort order to channels by adding a 1 or a number before the name of the channel. So after the team has created a set of channels and the channels are stabilizing, you can then sort those channels if you'd like. Instead of using just the alpha, the alpha ordering, you can use the alphanumeric ordering by inserting numbers beforehand. And I encourage, particularly when you're starting out, to create an urgent or escalations channel and have everyone on the team follow that channel. That way, if there's anything important related to that project, you can pull people in who might be primarily using Outlook, and they will, if they don't respond to a notification of a channel that they're following, typically within an hour, then it will send them an email. So it's a good way to keep the conversation going and having a lively conversation in Teams using the following channel. And just so everyone knows, to follow a channel, you go to the More menu that's either here in the left rail or here at the top of the channel, and you select the option to follow this channel. It's also helpful to remember that you can email into a channel, and you can get the email address and then, for example, set up a rule in Outlook that forwards messages to a channel, and it'll appear right as a post and an attachment in Teams. It's a nice feature. Whenever I create a team, I always have at least one additional owner for the team in case I'm on vacation, someone else can get involved. And sometimes I'll start, when I set up a channel, I'll start very loose and allow people to create channels, create tabs, etc. And then, at some point, maybe a month into a project, during a team meeting, I'll bring up the fact that I think it's time to lock things down so that, someone joining the team might not make a mistake and delete something. And then I'll restrict privileges saying, hey, when you need to make a change, let me know, and we can have a conversation about it and make that change together. Now, when it comes to tabs, I think the key points I mentioned earlier, that you should have a tab for decisions. You could, which OneNote and Wiki are obvious options. You should have a tab for data and a tab for a task list. So recognize that you can change the name of a channel. I'm not going to mess around this channel. Let's go to this team, and for example, I can change the name of the OneNote or the any one of the channel names can be easily changed by thought I could change it. I'll give you an example of Power BI. This, by the way, this OneNote is one of the original channels that Teams had. And the key point I want to make here is that with Wiki and with the new OneNotes that are created, you can rename them. So for example, I could make this decisions and save that item. And that way it's obvious, what are the different key aspects of the tabs. When I see a team and the tabs are named as the products are, like that one, that sort of shows a sort of older channel that we hadn't updated. I think it's best not to have channel names that are the product names. So instead of planner, I call it task list, or you could see that one was called design request. And I make this point earlier about task list and metrics. So whenever I start a new conversation, I will, typically go to the compose form, which is the A with the pen that's underneath the word start. And I always view this as a little reminder where it says type an @ to mention someone. So whenever I do a new post, I typically have a subject line, and then I will have an @, and I will individually mention folks, and typically a backspace over their last name. This is a key aspect of the product. So at Microsoft, we view the information in Teams as FYI only. It's, in a sense, a lower priority than email, unless you've been specifically mentioned. And we consider a channel mention or a team mention as somewhere in between FYI and a regular email exchange. So the way I think about it, if I'm individually mentioned, that's as if I'm on a two-line an email as an individual. If there is a channel mention, so you're typing the word @channel, and it fills in the name of this channel, which is called Bugsflow, that's the equivalent of being in an alias or a distribution list that's on the two-line. And if someone does an @team, so they mention the entire team, that's the equivalent of having a distribution list that's on the CC line of an email. So in terms of rough prioritization, that gives you a sense. And I think that these last two options, @channel and @team, are something that should be used very rarely. In fact, in our primary team for Microsoft Teams, we actually don't allow @channel and @team because we just found that they were abused. So those are settings you can actually turn off in the admin setting. So the @mentions are critical because a person will get a notification in the activity app, and this activity app really becomes the one inbox for a team. So I view it as sort of the control center for teams. One of the common frustrations people have is they'll start to use Teams on a particular project, and everyone can stay on top of half a dozen channels. But then once you get on multiple teams and they each have half a dozen channels, it quickly becomes overwhelming. So from the beginning, it's critical to set a culture of using @mentions selectively. And now that we have guest access on Teams, you can see that I have a version of this team with internal only, and then a version with guests. And always to make the habit of checking out whether a team has guests, and looking for that when you are about to collaborate in a channel, because you want to be aware of what could be shared with customers or partners or vendors. And this is more on the importance of using @mentions. In the absence of @mentions, Teams can become quickly overwhelming. if you create a culture of using it effectively, it's a huge time savings. In my case, I probably save an hour a day because of the way that teams can really present information effectively. So here's some examples of what has worked well for many companies. For example, to use Teams on the help desk with one channel per product, in sales with one channel per customer engagement, to track regular meetings, for new employee orientation. This is a super helpful public channel or public team that can be created. And there's a lot of benefits, and I'll share this presentation with you later, so many aspects of this are perhaps easier read. In terms of management, I find it very helpful to have one-on-one conversations with my manager and my direct reports using Teams. And I'll take advantage of the fact that individual chats, so one-on-one chats, can have really complex conversations, and you, for example, can create dashboards for particular activities that you want to report to your manager. You can pull in data from websites. I've been doing a series of training sessions, and it's very helpful for my manager to see how that is going in terms of these sessions, and the registrations, the progress in terms of attendees. And these are examples of the two types of tabs you can add to a one-on-one chat, Power BI and websites. And these can extend outside your organization as well. So you can have a one-on-one chat with guests and include these rich capabilities. So, the key thing is Teams is flexible, adapt it to your needs, and look for best practices. And a great way of spreading best practices across the organization is that group of champions I talked about earlier. Having a monthly meeting, sort of a lunch and learn session with champions where they exchange best practices is a great way to spread information across the company. So in terms of your personal effectiveness with Teams, I think without the mobile app, you're losing perhaps half the benefit of Teams. So we have great Android and iOS applications. And in terms of iOS, Teams works well on both the iPad and the iPhone. So I encourage everyone to have that installed. A typical company runs at about 20% mobile usage, and I think a really effective company is north of 30%. So I would, watch that as a way of judging how mature the organization is. We'll talk about the activity app and bookmarks. This is important, using the browser as a secondary window. So we'll often hear feedback about, how nice it is in, say, Skype for Business to have different chat windows. And you can create that same effect with Teams by having Teams open on both the desktop and the browser at the same time. So let's talk about some of these. The mobile app is pretty straightforward. You look for it in your app store, the Apple or iOS store. When you go through customizing Teams, it is many people find the dark theme very helpful, and it's not that discoverable. From an accessibility perspective, there's also the high contrast theme, but I suggest people try out the dark theme. Often in the evenings, I'll use the dark theme just because I find it more relaxing on my eyes. You can customize the speed of notifications, and I think I'd mentioned earlier that we often deprecate the channel mentions and team mentions so that they aren't used too extensively. And you can customize those notifications in your personal profile. So under settings, I can change to the dark theme, which particularly our engineers really enjoy. And then in terms of notifications, you can see that I've deprecated the channel and team mentions so that they are, I'm not getting emails every time someone does a channel mention. If they don't mention me individually, I probably don't need to get an email on it. Then you'll see I've got the email frequency set to every 10 minutes. The standard is every hour, and I think as soon as possible is too frequent. I find every 10 minutes just about right to keep my collaborations efficient. I use saved quite extensively. Many people aren't aware that bookmarks are things that only they see. No one else sees their bookmarks. And I feel that the saved app is a little bit hidden under the personal profile, but often when I'm working on my mobile device, I will save an item because I want a full keyboard or maybe just a little bit more time at my desk as opposed to when I'm on the move between meetings. So I use saved quite extensively, and it's here under the personal profile picture. And that is a great way of creating your own little task list of things you need to follow up with in Teams, and sorting through those after you've covered your activity app and your chat, your open chats, then getting into the saved app and clearing that. When I get through those, which I typically can do in about a half hour, I find that, now my day is ready for sort of my agenda as opposed to responding to other people's. Following channels is very helpful. I think it's best to have a specific channel that everyone on the team follows. I spoke earlier about an urgent channel for communication within the team, and an escalations channel where someone is, the people who are following it are the senior leaders inside the team. Some of our teams have both an urgent and an escalations channel, and I think that's a good way of keeping everyone focused on the key aspects of Teams. There is a lot of subtleties to the Teams user experience that is often lost. So I think most of you probably now are familiar with these little carrots on the side, but some people find those a little confusing. If you want to see all your channels open, they have to be set as favorites. If a team is not one of your favorites, you can't have more than one of them open at the same time. So that's a key aspect of the UI. Then if you have, see if any of these are renameable. Yeah, I guess that original OneNote, the original OneNote tab wasn't renameable, but most of the tabs are renameable, and if your tab names run too long, you can shorten the names. And a lot of people are also not aware that you can change the order of the tabs by dragging them around. And you can change the order of the teams by dragging them around as well in this left rail. So you can set the order of the teams that you personally see, and when you set the order of the tabs, that's for everyone to see. So that's my quick overview. I'm going to stop recording so that we can go through your questions.